Welcome to your personalized deep dive. You're going to get the inside scoop from the January 2025 Ulster Airmail. So let's get right into it. And wait till you hear about the efforts to get a short SB.5 added to a museum collection. But first, let's set the scene with the changing landscape of air travel. What did you think of the editor's comments in Ulster Airmail?
Well, it really drives home the fact that we're in a transition period, the end of an era for the large four-engine airliners, like the 747, for example.
It makes me a little nostalgic, honestly.
Oh, yeah.
I remember flying on a 747 as a kid. It was an experience. I even got to peek inside the cockpit.
That's a great memory. And these large aircraft were revolutionary in their time, but technology has moved on. We're seeing a real shift towards those more fuel-efficient twin-engine aircraft. Think Dreamliner's A350s, even some of the newer 777s.
And that's got to have implications for the types of routes airlines are offering.
Exactly. And it's not just the big players. We're seeing the rise of budget transatlantic travel using smaller jets like the 737 and A320. It's incredible how affordable it's become to hop across the pond. And now with the A.321 XLR entering the scene, the game is changing yet again. This aircraft has the range to potentially open up even more direct routes for long-distance travel.
That could be revolutionary. Imagine flying directly from Belfast to, say, the west coast of the U.S. without a layover. It could really shake things up in the travel industry.
Yeah.
But let's shift gears for a moment and talk about a story that really showcases the power of aviation, and specifically a certain aircraft to connect generations. It's about a son who arranged a truly special museum visit for his father.
Yes, this one really warmed my heart. This son wanted to surprise his father, who had been an aircraft engineer on the HMS Ark Royal back in the 70s. And the aircraft, a Phantom FG.1. And not just any Phantom, it was the specific one his father worked on. XT-864 had quite the journey itself, from serving with the Fleet Air Arm to being transferred to the RAF. It even spent some time as a geek guardian before finally landing at the museum.
It must have been an incredibly emotional experience for the father, seeing that aircraft again.
I can only imagine. It wasn't just about the aircraft, but all the memories and experiences tied to it. It's those personal connections that make aviation history so compelling.
Speaking of which, the Ulster Aviation Society is really making waves with their plans for 2025. What stood out to you in the chairman's column in Ulster Airmail?
Well, it's quite ambitious. They're facing some logistical challenges, even having to move some of the exhibits to make way for repairs to Hangar 1. They're trying to source a double Mamba engine for the Gannet, and get this potentially even autogyros. But the real prize is the short SB.5 research aircraft they're trying to secure on loan from the RAF Museum. And while they might seem like something from the past, they're actually relevant to Northern Ireland.
And what's the story with the SB.5? Why is the Ulster Aviation Society so keen to get one?
The SB.5 is incredibly rare. Only a handful were built. It played a pivotal role in early jet research. It was actually designed to test different wing configurations to see which would be best for early jet aircraft. Just imagine being able to see one of those up close.
That would be incredible. And they're even considering acquiring a Sea King helicopter. It seems like they're on a mission to build an even more impressive collection.
It's inspiring to see their passion. And it's not just about collecting aircraft, it's about preserving history. And speaking of history, did you know that RAF Long Kesh has played quite a diverse role over the years?
The chairman mentioned that. It's easy to forget that places like that have a rich history beyond their most recent use.
It was a base for the RAF, of course, but also the Royal Navy Fleet Air Arm and the Army Air Corps. Even civilian gliding clubs used it. So many different aspects of aviation were connected to this one place.
But now let's take a virtual trip to a place dedicated to a very specific kind of flying, the Scottish Gliding Centre, as featured in Ulster Airmail's Places to Go section.
This piece really captured the atmosphere of the Scottish Gliding Centre. Located at Portmoak Airfield, it's a former farm with a vast grass strip. And the author perfectly describes the open spaces and the thrill of watching gliders silently soar through the air.
And the author witnessed both tug launches and winch launches. Did you get a sense of the difference between the two?
Oh, absolutely. It's a night and day difference, really. Tug launches are smoother, with the glider gradually gaining altitude. Winch launches, though, they're like being catapulted into the sky. The author even mentions seeing a tug launch aborted because the wind was too calm. It really emphasizes how much gliding relies on nature's cooperation.
I can see why the author was so captivated by the experience. Have you ever tried gliding?
Not yet, but it's definitely on my bucket list. It must be an incredible feeling to soar silently above the landscape, relying on nothing but wind and skill.
Maybe something we could explore together. And speaking of exploring, our virtual aviation tour continues with another Places to Go, the Midland Air Museum.
This one was a real treat. It's home to the Sir Frank Whittlejet Heritage Center, which alone is worth the trip.
And the aircraft collection is phenomenal. They have a Saab J-29, the Swedish fighter, which is apparently the only one in the UK. And let's not forget the Airfix models.
Those were a real surprise. They had a huge collection of meticulously detailed Airfix models, from individual aircraft to elaborate dioramas. They were almost as impressive as the real aircraft.
But for those who prefer the real deal, there's an Avro Vulcan you can actually go inside.
And the museum also has an intact Armstrong Whitworth cargo aircraft with an accessible cargo area. Each aircraft has its own story to tell, and the Midland Air Museum does a fantastic job of bringing those stories to life. But if you're looking for a more adrenaline-pumping experience, our next places to go is for you.
That would be the Mach Loop, wouldn't it? That legendary RAF low-flying area in Wales where you can see aircraft zipping through the valleys at incredible speeds. I've heard it's a must-visit for any aviation enthusiast.
And the author of this piece perfectly captures the thrill, but also the patience required. You might spend hours waiting and hoping for a glimpse of something special.
But when you do see something, it's worth the wait. The author describes seeing 4 RAF Texans flying in a clockwise direction, which is apparently unusual. But you won't believe this, the day before they were there, someone spotted U.S. Air Force F-35s and F-15s flying through the loop.
You never know what you're going to see at the Mach Loop. It's that element of surprise that keeps people coming back.
But let's step back in time again and delve into Made in Ulster, short Stirling series. This one focuses on the production of those bombers during World War II, right here in Belfast.
Short brothers had to overcome so many challenges, from Luftwaffe reconnaissance flights to the devastating April 1941 Blitz. They even lost 5 Stirlings that were under construction when the city was bombed.
The story of Stirling N6029 really stood out to me. It's a detailed account of the bomber's missions, its eventual loss in the North Sea, and the remarkable survival of the crew.
They managed to ditch the aircraft after being attacked and survived for 6 days in a dinghy before being captured as POWs. Talk about resilience. Their story really highlights the human cost of war and the incredible bravery of those who flew these aircraft.
Let's step inside the hangar for a closer look at the ongoing restoration of Tucano ZF-378 at the Ulster Aviation Society. In the hangar section of Ulster Airmail gives a great behind-the-scenes look at this meticulous process.
It's like watching a giant 3D jigsaw puzzle come together. They had to find space for the fuselage, maneuver the wings into place, and there was even a moment of panic when they discovered the elevator counterbalances were missing.
I can only imagine. But they managed to track them down, and they're making great progress. It's fascinating to see the level of detail and the dedication involved in these restorations. Speaking of honoring legacies, the magazine also included a touching tribute to Brian Hagan, a volunteer electrician at the Society who recently passed away.
Brian was instrumental in restoring the Sea Prince, and the Society decided to include his name on the aircraft as a permanent tribute. A beautiful gesture, I think.
But there's one more source we need to cover before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, and it tackles a very important topic. The book review of Absent Aviators really got me thinking.
This book is a powerful look at the underrepresentation of women in the aviation industry, isn't it? It really challenges us to think about the barriers that women face in this field.
It's not just about individual choices or preferences, but about deeply ingrained societal expectations and, frankly, a lack of awareness.
The book argues that this lack of diversity ultimately hurts the industry as a whole. We're missing out on a vast pool of talent and perspective.
That's such an important point.
The book highlights how deeply ingrained societal norms and expectations actually steer girls away from STEM fields from a young age.
It's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. If girls aren't encouraged to pursue STEM subjects, they're less likely to consider careers in those fields, and the cycle continues.
And the book also examines the workplace culture within the aviation industry. It can be very masculine-dominated, which can create a sense of exclusion for women. The book doesn't shy away from those uncomfortable truths, and it calls on the industry to take concrete steps to create a more inclusive environment.
What kind of steps are they suggesting?
Well, for starters, promoting STEM education for girls at a young age, also providing mentorship opportunities for women who are already in the industry, and addressing those subtle biases that can make it harder for women to advance in their careers.
So as we kind of get ready to wrap this up, what will you take away from this deep dive?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway for me is the sheer breadth and depth of the aviation world. It's a field that encompasses technology history, human ingenuity, and a constant striving for progress.
It's true. It's a reminder that aviation is more than just a means of transportation. It's a reflection of our dreams, our ambitions, and our desire to connect with the world around us. So as you continue to explore the world of aviation, whether it's through reading, visiting museums, or even considering a career in the field, Remember that there's always something new to discover. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating world of aviation.